Hey, KS Guncom, it's Lyle Cadell back with you this evening for our live fire segment. And you'll probably notice down on the bottom that we've got at least one of our guests in tonight, and the other one is one of the guys who serves as an admin on our stuff, and that's Clint Turner from down at Williams Gunworks. So he'll be in the background and kind of monitoring things, and when he has a bright idea come to his mind, he'll ask a question, maybe. I don't know. But Chuck Haggard is with us. He's the legendary lawman from TPD. Of course, that's Topeka Police Department. Served there for, how long did you serve with TPD, Chuck?
28 years.
28 years. And then you served with Forbes for another...
I'm still out there. It's been 3.5 now.
So over 30 years of experience. Buck Peddicord, his computer took a dive this afternoon. However, he's trying to get his iPad up and running, and so he'll be joining us momentarily. But right now, we're glad to I'm glad to have these two guys with us right now. And you know, one of the things that I know this is one of the things that Chuck, actually, you wanted to talk about here the other day, and it isn't necessarily range versus reality related, but it was mistaken shooting type stuff. And so maybe we can just kind of dive into that while we're waiting on Buck and talk about that. That South Carolina case where the dad shot the daughter that was coming in about 1 o'clock in the morning from a party.
Yeah, we got our conversation started on that was I noticed in the self-defense community, firearm self-defense community, there seems to be people that almost pride themselves on my dad was a Marine, or I grew up shooting guns, things like that, so they don't need any training. And if you look statistically at things like the Armed Citizen and American Rifleman magazine, to where you have these compilations of self-defense shootings, that people without training tend to do pretty well. The problem is they tend to do pretty well until they don't, and make really bad mistakes. Over the past 10 years, let's say, I've been really paying attention to this because, in Kansas, we haven't had concealed carry that long. So it just wasn't a thing, and I see more and more of these cases where you have mistaken identity shooting. You shoot one of your kids sneaking into the house. I know of a case where a gentleman that had dementia, elderly gentleman that had dementia, was shot outside a house as a prowler because the homeowner went out and confronted him, thought the guy was a car burglar, things like that. So a lot of times the technical shooting issues that we have to deal with in a self-defense case are not that tough, but the judgmental issues is where people get really jammed up. Personally, I'm all for training, the marksmanship training, advanced marksmanship training, getting tactics in, things like that. But I think I'd rather people be able to have a baseline level of competency with their firearms, be able to handle them well, and then get themselves to some sort of training where they have some interactive component to where they're actually dealing with tactics and the human issues where you're dealing with people, so that we don't have some of these problems.
One of the things that I've been thinking about preparing for this very episode, and I've talked to some instructors and just wandered around in my mind, and it kind of blends in with this issue. And I know that individual in South Carolina, the father, and I can't imagine, in the situation you were talking about too, with the gentleman with dementia, the pain that someone would go through that used the weapon. I mean, it's just horrible, awful. However, on the training, kind of segue into range work, we have really kind of and maybe you can help me out too. As a society, maybe we've kind of, or a community. Let me put it that way. We've geared ourselves like, you come across the threshold of my door, and I'm going to blow your brains out. And we don't critically think about who is coming across the threshold of my door, rather than, do you get what I'm trying to say there?
Oh, absolutely. I have this conversation almost weekly. One of the groups that I'm connected with on the side is primary and secondary.
Right.
You've probably seen them on
Oh
Facebook.
yeah.
They got the online forums. My friend Matt Landfair and I are constantly battling the derp of people. Well, how the gal got killed the other day by the dad, firing blindly, not identifying your target. The four rules as outlined by Jeff Cooper are pretty good ones. Rule 4: identify your target, know what's between you and the target, know what's beyond the target. When we go to the range, that's easy because you have your target and you've got your berm, the bullets go into the berm, and that's the way it's supposed to be. But it becomes a lot more nebulous when we're out on the street or even in our own home. Uh, I don't know what kind of life people live that they think that they're going to be assaulted by ninjas and they have to shoot at shadows in their own house.
Yeah.
But personally, I think if you have a home defense firearm, you should have a light that goes with it, particularly a handheld flashlight, and you should have some practice in utilizing those together. People will make ridiculous statements like, well, I'm not going to give away my position. It's just patently ridiculous. I can tell you, even in the military, when you're on guard post, they had this thing called HALT. Who goes there? I don't know why that isn't something people think of. The advice I give to people is have your house set up, locks, doors, things like that, where it's reinforced, where you have a multi-tier level. If your only home defense tool is the gun, you're counting on the fact that you're going to wake up in time to be able to get it. Well, to get into your house, it should take a lot of work and make a lot of noise.
Right.
We had a burglary crew in Topeka a few years ago that was walking either jimmying doors or walking through unlocked doors in the middle of the night. And they would actually put a guy with a gun posted up on people's bedrooms. And the rest of the crew would empty out your house. If you woke up and confronted them, you were going to get gunned down. And they were using tactics like in one of those burglaries, the homeowner's dog went, I think it was an Akita. It was one of the protective type dogs, went outside after the burglars, and the dog got shot because they had somebody posted up in the backyard with a gun. They were doing things like, if you had a low roof, like a side garage, they'd put a guy on the roof with a shotgun in case, as a homeowner, you chase the burglars out into the yard, you were going to get shot from behind. So the bad guys, you can use tactics too. But across the board, that crew got into houses silently. And the only way you do that is your doors aren't up to par, your locks aren't up to par, or you aren't locking your house. That's your first layer of defense. Quite frankly, you can come to my house and I don't have to worry too much about you. Oh my God, I have to start shooting now, because the average crackhead is going to bounce off my door all day long before they get it booted open. That's $50 worth of hardware can ensure that now you're not in a shooting in your living room.
Yeah. No, and that's I think it's really, and that comes down to mindset. What I prefaced that with comes down to mindset. That it isn't just you cross the threshold on my door and you're going to get shot. And it's rather who's coming across. And unfortunately for that father in South Carolina, I mean, he can't take that back. I just can't imagine that kind of pain.
Well, I know cases that you're talking about. I know of people shooting their own kids, people shooting their own spouse. I know of a case where an autistic child forced their way into a house, and they thought they were home, and it was the wrong house. I've worked more than one case where a drunk thought he had gone to his house, his key wasn't working in the door, so he's like, screw it, and he starts kicking on the door.
Oh my.
You know, I don't know about you, but I would prefer not to kill a guy because he got drunk and a little dumb if I can avoid it, you know. And like you say, there's a lot of people like, well, you come in my house, it's just not that simple. It's really just not that simple.
I had that happen when I lived in Wamego town. Where actually Buck lives right outside of Wamego, but no, we were in a home. We had a house there, and a guy, he was stupid drunk, middle of the night, and I heard him come up on the porch, and I pulled my gun, and I had the ability to see the where how the rooms were situated. I could see the front door, and I could tell, he was stumbling around and stuff, and he started banging on the door, and I set myself up, to be able to ambush him, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you make that decision that hopefully the dude, and he did. He realized that, oh yeah, this is not my house. Stumbled off my front porch and went on. So fortunately that night, things turned out well.
Nowadays with the technology, you can even like they have let's say the Ring doorbells. They got
Yeah.
you can have the technology at your door where you can look at your smartphone, see who's out there, and you can actually talk to them. And like in your case, you wouldn't even have to post up, close to the door. You could be more safely deeper in the house because let's say it was ninjas trying to get you in a home invasion. Now you got a better tactical advantage. But if it's the drunk, which it's much more likely to be, or something that's similar to that, now you can interact with them with the technology. Hey, get off my porch! You're at the wrong house. That kind of thing. And it's Kansas. We don't have, in most places, it's not super liberal, things like that. It's still America here. But I think if you can avoid a shooting because it's probably going to cost you pretty good for lawyers' bills, things like that, even a completely legitimate shooting.
Yes, it will. That's a guaranteed. One of the things is we're still waiting on Buck Peddicord to get up and running, but we're just gonna talk here in a little bit before he gets here. I did have some things that we do want to get to. Maybe just get your take on a few things with range versus reality. And what I'd realized and why I wanted to bring this segment to the community was there's a lot of things that you see on the range that are done by instructors, and it doesn't match reality. and and some things do. I mean, there's a lot of good training out there. So I don't want to just totally dump on instructors, all that type of thing. I've done some work myself, and Clint's an instructor. You are, so that's not what we're trying to do. But there, for instance, I'm going to just throw a for instance out there of the idea. I think that is a constant taught thing, and maybe you can help us out with this. Is that we automatically are teaching people fundamentals of two-handed shooting, which is good, I'll say. But in your experience from being an officer, as well as well, I mean, you're an officer still, so it's not. I mean, as an officer for over 30 years, that from a civilian standpoint, or even from an LEO standpoint, how many times have you had the absolute chance to press out both hands, or you've had to have a light, or you've had to have this hand active, and you've had to go one-handed? And we don't teach that enough on the range, when in reality, you're going to either have to be using your strong hand or your weak hand a lot more in reality.
Like I say, if you get the technical skills to shoot strong hand only, then when you add a second hand to the gun, you're going to shoot even better. So shooting one hand only is a good skill to have. Actually, in a civilian concealed carry confrontation, say an armed robbery, something like that, we look at like Tom Gibbons' student database, because the last I talked to Tom, he was something up 64, 65 students of his concealed carry shootings. And these are all fully investigated, legitimate self-defense shootings. The vast majority of those were, he didn't like to use the word average, but typically within a car length. So the person was confronted, let's say in a robbery attempt or carjacking attempt, something like that, at a distance to where they could actually get the gun deployed, get two hands on the gun, get the gun up into the eye target line, and put hits on target. And Tom's students have a near 100% hit rate. Utilizing a light in a street scenario, I haven't seen that yet, nor have I seen a situation for civilian concealed carry outside the home where a light was used or useful. I tell people all the time that if you're in the ninja closet and it's pitch dark out, the bad guys can't find you to rob you. That even though it's in the hours of darkness, typically, if you think about a Walmart parking lot, the mall parking lot, things like that, and a lot of street crime is parking lot crime, because it's transitional spaces that people are negotiating. Or if, I've seen more than one robbery case at the gas pumps of a convenience store late at night. So if you think about those, they're not in the dark. Those are typically
very well lit.
really well lit places. There's street lights. There's lighting on stores, signs, things like that. So the use of the needing to have a handheld light for a scenario like that really doesn't happen. I would say even in nighttime, in my experience, most of my career I spent as some sort of night shift cop. Having to have a flashlight in those scenarios to identify your target is actually pretty rare. Flip that around to a home defense scenario, though, those tend to be dark. Burglars tend to sneak into the house in the dark, trying not to be seen if they're going to do a nighttime break-in. And then it behooves you to have a light with your gun. I always stage a handheld light anyway, because, like just the other night when we had all the storms coming through, the power went out. It's better to be able to find your light in the dark than to go stumbling around trying to find it. Where did I leave my flashlight? That kind of thing. But I think it really behooves you in a home defense scenario to have a light available. And then in street level police work, when you have to start doing things like search buildings, then of course you have to have a light in order to get into those dark corners, closets, things like that. And then the skills that you're talking about, it's a little bit more advanced shooting, a little bit more advanced tactics if you're actually going to go hunting for people in buildings. But having those tactics and having that ability to shoot at least across the average room one-handed well, I'd say out to 5 to 7 yards, probably a pretty good skill to have.
Yeah, and that's, something that truly, and if you think about it too, if you're in a shooting match with somebody, in the likelihood of a civilian getting in that type of an entanglement is, so it's slim, but there is the possibility, maybe a probability. And the first thing, if you're, full isosceles or whatever, what's the first thing that's going to get hit? Well, it's going to be your appendages. Most likely, if somebody is going center mass at you, or if there's a knife being used, and I think that on the range it behooves us, and from my perspective, maybe wrong, to do a lot more strong hand when we can, training and drilling. I like to use dot torture, for instance. That little what's it? I think it comes from pistoltraining.com.
Yeah, that's on Todd Green, who's unfortunately no longer with us.
Right, he passed away.
Drills that he had on his site that you can internet that. The nice thing about dot torture is you can print it on just regular copy paper off
Right.
your computer. You get, nearly free targets all the time. I really like dot torture because along the little dots, it has the directions.
Right.
Like you're shooting this drill, like 5 rounds, strong hand only. 5 shots from the draw. You can modify it for an indoor range. If you're not allowed to draw from the holster, you can do that from the ready, the low ready, and come up off the little the little platform in front of you at the indoor range. But it gives people targeted practice. It's kind of like a workout. Most people that are successful at working out, weightlifting, have a plan. They just don't walk into the gym and start throwing weights around. But, unfortunately, I see people that go out to shoot, they just plank. They don't have a plan for skill development.
Yeah.
And then having something like dot torture where you are guiding yourself and it's measurable, because you can 3-hole punch those, throw them in a notebook, or you scan them into your computer, and during a period of time you can see what your progression is. I know people that have gone dot torture at 3 yards, had a lot of trouble with it, worked to the point where they're 100% at 3 yards. So now it's time to back up to 5 yards, and give it a try. So that's the type of thing where you can do a lot of self-directed skills development. And that's good marksmanship. The other component, gun handling, that doesn't get you there so much. When you were talking about 1 hand on the gun, 2 hands on the gun, I probably worry about that less personally than the fact that what I see is people with almost no awareness of their trigger finger and almost no awareness of their muzzle, and not having their muzzle direction and that sort of thing ingrained into their weapon handling. And that's where I'm a big proponent of people buying a dummy gun, even if you don't get a really nice one like Blue Rings guns. Black Hawk makes like the orange Glocks. You can get some of the cheaper copies of some of those things on the internet, on Amazon, for like $12-15. Utilizing that, having a dummy gun and a flashlight, moving through your house, moving amongst your loved ones without pointing a gun at them accidentally. That's a lot of work you can do outside the range that typically isn't, people don't advocate for that as much, in my observation.
Well, in the dot torture, I literally have a stack, like you said. I mean, I just printed mine off, and I carry a little thing of targets to the range all the time, and that's in my stack, to do. Now, there have been times where, that I, in 50 rounds is all it takes too.
Yeah.
To go through that. And there's times where, truly I've stunk it up, man. I've sucked at it bad, and there's times when you have a good day, and that's at like 5 yards is where I keep it at. And, but it tells Lyle, you need to work on this. You need to work on that. And it's a good diagnostic tool. One of the things I wanted to kind of segue, I'm actually messaging back and forth with Buck right now, trying to get him on here. But kind of segue into that kind of lends itself to this issue is this may be controversial to folks, I don't know, but we have really emphasized the draw time to target, and we put the timer on it, right? So you have a 1.5 draw, or now you're down to 1 second draw time, and we've got folks pulling out and bam, pulling out, bam, pulling out, bam. And even in their dry fire, what they're doing is they're coming out and pulling the trigger. And my question that I'm going to raise here is, that's a range technique. That's a way to measure. It's a metric as well as a training technique. But is it building muscle memory in the fact that rather than drawing up as an officer, for instance, you draw out of the holster and put somebody on notice, if you will, you're not going to blast them right there. You have to index. And I would really be interested in what you think about drawing to index and going through the OODA loop and dealing with this individual through maybe a little verbal judo, rather than drawing and pressing a trigger and then having a lawyer attached to the end of that bullet that I really don't want.
Particularly in law enforcement, we challenge people with the gun out a lot. Felony car stops, burglary suspects, robbery suspects, things like that. I can't tell you how many people I have had at gunpoint. Literally thousands. It's happened thousands of times. Something that I notice in the law enforcement community that I have a very big problem with is a lot of guys just go through the qualification course. And if you just do the Kansas CPOS course, all you do is pull the trigger, or you pull the gun, go straight to the target, start pulling the trigger. Most people don't practice going to a low ready and issuing a verbal challenge. Back up, police officer, don't move, things like that. I'll see people where I tell them the drill is going to be a challenge. They'll pull the gun goes up to center mass, their finger touches the trigger, and then they back off and remember what they're doing. I think not pulling the gun to a low ready and practicing verbal commands is a big failing. That is something that people need to do. And again, this is something you can bring into your dry practice. Have your dummy gun at home. Draw your gun. You have your gun at low ready. Have your trigger finger positively indexed up on the slide and away from the trigger, assuming you're carrying a semi-automatic pistol. And then, go through your mental loop of voice commands. Back up, show me your hands, get away from me, police officer, don't move, whatever the case may be. We're not supposed to muzzle anything we're not willing to destroy. And if you haven't made the decision yet to shoot that person, you're probably on shaky grounds to be putting a muzzle on them. A lot of people don't know this. I point this out to the cops that I do training with when I do use of force training. Codified in Kansas law, it states that the threat of deadly force is a use of force. By law, use of force. So if I pull a gun just on the street, you're walking down the street and I don't like you, I pull a gun out and I point it at you, Lyle. That right there is an aggravated assault. I put you in reasonable fear of death or great bodily harm.
Hey, there's Buck.
In a self-defense situation, I have to be able to articulate why I did that, why that's a legitimate use of force. Hey, Buck.
How's it going, Chuck?
Buck has joined us, man. Brother, it's good to see you.
I hired a new IT department.
What's that? Say it again.
I hired a whole new IT department. Fired new ones, hired new ones.
There you go. Sometimes you got to do that.
Yeah.
Well, brother, I'm glad to see you. We were just talking about, just to kind of bring you into the loop here. We were talking about the idea that folks are really, I'm getting some feedback from somewhere, but folks are really getting with the timers out on the range and the draw time. Hey, I got a 1.5. I got a under a 1 second. I'm down to a 9.6 from draw to shot. And are we, and even in dry fire for that matter, and are we teaching them building muscle memory to actually come out and do something that they might not want to do, rather than coming out and indexing and giving verbal commands to that individual of get back, stop, get away from me now, and those type of things, rather than coming out and bam. Does that make sense?
Does. Are we? Is that a question or a statement?
Yeah, it is a question. I mean, what's your feeling with that technique of training out on the range?
Well, I'm somewhere in between.
Okay.
And law enforcement does a very poor job on the range of articulating verbalization. But on the other hand, I would say law enforcement does a pretty good job of verbalization on the road. Maybe not clear verbalization, but they're generally screaming something on the road, and they say nothing on the range. You know, do civilians or, you know, do people training get enough repetition to build muscle memory or cortexual memory? Maybe. I'm not a speed guy, but I do believe that, you know, it's good to train to speed, but we can definitely physically do things faster than we can think what we need to do. There's no doubt. I mean, that's proven. So
That is fascinating. You said two things that I caught on to. That you're not into speed, and then we think faster than we can act. Is that what you just said?
We act
Or we act faster than we can think. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. We're capable of acting faster than we're capable of cognitive decision.
So how do we train for that on the range and then bring it into reality?
You know, I think as long as everybody understands the context of what they're doing on the range, it's okay. You know, like we do lots of speed drills. Our speed drills are simply stance and recoil management drills. Like that's all we're checking is do you have a good stance and do you have good recoil management? Because anybody can yank the trigger. So, you know, our speed drills literally are for that, as long as people understand that. You know, the other, like, I don't know what Chuck's opinion is. I don't think you can train the other until you're doing force on force type stuff repetitively. Like that's the only place to get that you can build in a predetermined verbalization. But what if the predetermined verbalization isn't applicable? You know, that's pretty hard. I guess it depends on your perspective and your background. Mine would be that coming from like doing, you know, doing minimalistic undercover work and stuff. You know, you either like, I don't know that you can train people to, I think you can train people to think on your feet, but I think it's a far more difficult skill to train than it is to train a 1.25 second draw. Like I think that's doable, but the thinking and the verbalization, that takes really dedicated type training. It takes a lot of thinking. It takes putting yourself in daily situations, but in your mind applying it to your training and use of force situations. I don't know. Chuck probably has a better view of that than I do.
I think where the gun handling, the marksmanship, being competent, like really competent with your gun that I've seen comes into play is if you don't have to think of the mechanics of, and you don't have to worry about your competency with, because I've seen people accelerate themselves into shootings over being unsure of themselves, so they're trying to get a jump on the situation. Maybe they get their finger on the trigger early, they get their muzzle on the target early, have an ND, things like that, some sort of negative outcome. That comes from a lack of competence in their skills. If you are competent in your gun handling, your draw, things like that, then you're not going to worry about that stuff because that's going to go on autopilot. And that leaves the cognitive part of your brain to process a scenario that you're in, do your talking and things like that. And that's where I see the range competency really pays for itself, is that you don't have to think about that stuff. And a lot of shooters that I've seen don't get above the level of conscious competence where they have to talk themselves through a grip, trigger press, things like that. Once you reach that unconscious competence, you're a lot better off mentally dealing with these scenarios because you can put all your brain power into that. my analogy would be if you're driving down the road, if you're a new driver, like let's say you're going through driver's ed and you have to think about things. Hey, there's a stop sign coming up. I got to put my foot on the brake. I don't want to like hit the brakes too hard. I'm going to jostle the instructor, things like that. You're conscious about what you're doing. You're going to be less prepared for an emergency, like a car pulls out of a driveway right in front of you, instead of a more experienced driver who's just going to react competently with that without having to think about it. Hopefully that makes sense.
So what would be the thing, Chuck, that you would say to utilize on the range? What training technique would you say or drill could do that?
I would work the drilling on the mechanics so that I've got a decent draw. I'm confident in my ability to hit targets. Work with somebody that can evaluate my gun handling. Maybe I've got sloppy gun handling, things like that. I will throw out that a difference between range and reality that I've seen is semi-automatic pistols in real life are much less reliable than they are on the range. I talk to people all the time. They're like, my gun's got 10,000, match shooters like USPSA guys. My gun's got 10,000 rounds, 20,000 rounds through it. I've never had a stoppage. I can tell you the stoppages on the road because of some of the things you were talking about before. One-handed grip. I didn't get a good grip out of the holster. Maybe I'm floating the gun in a close quarters scenario. It is common for semi-automatic pistols to short stroke because people don't give them a good recoil platform, and you have a stovepipe or it fails to feed or something like that. So that is a difference between range, reality and range. But I would say your range time, your live fire range time should basically prove that your drive practice is valid. So you should be doing more than anything dry practice, trigger work, weapon handling drills, malfunctions drills. We talked about dummy gun working your way through your house with a flashlight and a gun, things like that. And then the live fire, because we all, except for Buck, who's got his own range, we all have limited access to live fire, so we have to maximize that. And then basically we use that to prove that our dry fire is working. That's what I think.
Buck, are you that sound familiar and good?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. It's I completely agree with having the mechanical ability in all of your technique is going to buy you time to think about what you're doing. And how do you get that? Well, it's repetition, and probably 75-80% of your repetition doesn't have to spend any money to do it. It's just time. Yeah. Now I will say, as an aside to that, is that I've seen a lot of people, do repetition on mechanical ability, and the problem is without somebody taking a look now and then, you can certainly get caught up in little traps, little weaknesses, really quick. So yeah. So that can sneak up on any of us. I mean, that's not an indictment on anybody or anything, but gun handling skills at 3 yards and in, and gun handling skills at 3 yards and out are two completely different animals. And
wow,
should be approached this,
that segues us to an interesting topic. And I talked to both of you guys. At least I know I talked to Buck about it, and that was the idea that we shoot to reset, and we teach folks to shoot to reset. Where do you all come down on that? I'll just put it in that terms. As far as, because you talked about 3 yards and in and 3 yards and out. So I'll talk about that. We get out there on the range and we bam and we let it out. Bam, we let it out. But when reality comes, where do y'all sit on that?
Well, the great thing about this is we come from two different approaches. And I still start with trigger reset and work my way away from trigger reset. So, you know, I still think it's an applicable technique in a given situations. But a person has to be like we're living, breathing, thinking humans, and we need to know when it's an applicable technique and when it's not. Like when I shoot a sniper rifle, I trap the trigger to the rear and until I've got that sight picture back. When I shoot at 100 yards with a handgun, most of the time I'm going to trap the trigger to the rear. You know, so those are situations. I like the technique in terms of wounded individuals. I think that it's something we can go back to foundational shooting of firing one single shot, starting all over again and firing one more single shot. You know, as in terms of that emergency, I'm one-handed. I'm losing a little bit of function. So, you know, I still teach it. I don't abandon it completely. But you'll probably catch me what I call slapping my trigger a lot more than you'll catch me reset my trigger too. So, you know.
So 5 yards and in, if you're in an entanglement face to face and you're moving 5 yards and in, would you say that it's a full finger back out and it's slapping that's going to be happening and you're shooting for your life, or are you consciously letting that trigger reset?
No, you know, up close, if I'm not trying to do a demo in front of a class and put, you know, bullet hole inside of a bullet hole, I'm slapping my trigger up in there.
Okay.
Yeah. I will tell you, weak hand only, you know, and then take some fingers away from it. You know, I'm probably trapping my trigger, but you know, I'm telling you, it's really situational. It's really dependent. Yeah. But the trigger trap was a foundational approach that had some inherent weaknesses under frickin' stress. There's absolutely no doubt about it. You know, there's no doubt about it.
Chuck, where do you come down on that, man?
I think it's one of the biggest disservices that's been inflicted upon the training community and law enforcement with the prevalence of Glocks and the Glock instructor school that they have going on. Teaches pin and reset. And what I see is people will shoot and pin the reset, then they'll pick up their sight picture. They'll just let it out till it clicks. And then what I see at that point is they honk on the trigger. Particularly basic recruits, I see people do that all the time. They'll get so worried about how much time they're eating up, but they've been ingrained to just let that trigger out to reset, and they honk on the next trigger pull. The really important part is how you pull the trigger, not how you reset the trigger. I'll let guys like Ernest Langdon has a very, very good series of trigger reset videos on YouTube. I think Ernest Langdon knows how to shoot. He's demonstrated, you know, he won the IDPA World Championships, or at least the Nationals, I forget which, with a SIG 220 initially, double action, single action gun, which you're not even supposed to be able to shoot well, you know, by conventional wisdom. What Buck's talking about, I will find myself doing like long range shooting because I've done sniper work as well. I will find that I slow down the entire process and really think about my follow through, and I'll pull the trigger and pin the trigger for probably half a second to a second. Imagine you were shooting a flintlock musket. When you pull the trigger, the hammer falls, and then there's that delay in the powder burn before the bullet leaves the barrel. I just kind of, mentally, I emphasize that follow through with a long range shot. But from my observation of handguns and lots of basic recruits coming through the academy when I was teaching, law enforcement officers from other agencies and stuff, I think the trigger reset, the trigger trapping, the pinning the trigger has been a horrible, literal training flaw or a training scar on law enforcement community that I've been a party to. And I also see if you change guns, that if the gun you change to has a longer reset. I've seen on video, officer involved shooting video, where the officer gets the shot off, and then you see him trying to get the gun to go off again. And what it turned out to be is they didn't let the trigger out enough to be able to pull the trigger again. And then also, I'm a big fan of snub nose revolvers. That's what I tend to use for backup guns. I know Buck's not into revolvers so much. So how do you got to run a revolver? All the way in, all the way out, and all the way out. And I'll throw out there, like you look at Jerry Michalek, that's not slowing him down any. You know, he had a Smith & Wesson 627, I think it was, 8-shot 357 Magnum. He hit all 8 rounds off in 1 second. So I think that we go back to Buck's. The
guy's a cyborg, man.
Well, he's definitely got the repetitions in. You know what Doc talked about is you get the repetitions in, and then it becomes an ingrained skill.
Buck, you gonna pull the Jerry Michalek out there, brother?
You know, I would like to. I'd like to put up my YouTube video and show you how I, burned it down like Jerry, but I don't have a video like that, so I can't do that. I'd sure like to have one though. I like to come up with one of those someday, but never gonna happen.
Now, both of you guys started out in law enforcement with the revolver. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
I didn't. I started out with a
really
45.
What was it again? Say it again.
An old 645.
Wow. So a DASA gun, though.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So, how many years did you guys serve with a DASA gun?
We had the Smith & Wesson 9mm for about 20 years at the PD. I carried a revolver for probably 3 years, and then the Smith & Wesson 9 for 20, and then we had Glocks after that.
Wow.
Yeah, we transitioned 92, 93, somewhere there, and the same guns TPD had. I don't know. I went to Glock mid 2000 somewhere. I don't know. After 2000, I don't know when. Shot an HK for a while in there. I don't know. It wasn't the prettiest double action trigger pull I ever shot in my life.
The Smith & Wessons is one reason Buck and I know each other, is I had to help them out repairing some of their guns.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll be doggone.
We learned what extractor bounce was. Over our way, anyway, we learned what extractor bounce was.
Extractor bounce.
Yeah.
Explain.
It's just a total fail to extract. Evidently, the extractor bounces over the rim. I don't know. Chuck, of course.
So you've got the rim of the round, and you got the extractor behind it, and as the gun is recoiling, it pulls the round out of the chamber. Where you really see this is the original M4s, the shorty ARs, M16 system the military had. They were over-gassed, and that's why they've got the heavier buffers to slow down the recoil cycle, and they've got the heavier inserts in the extractor spring. So what happens is the recoil becomes so violent that as everything goes to the rear, the extractor will actually bounce off of the rim of the case. So some of the Smith & Wessons were prone to that. Glock 22s can be prone to that. And then the early AR-15 systems, a lot of your cheaper ARs nowadays are still prone to that if you're using 5.56 ammo in the gun, because they're not using the mil-spec parts to mitigate those issues. So yeah, if you're having fails to extract, And it may be not, I've got a bad extractor, things like that. You might have an underpowered spring, incorrect buffer in your AR, those sorts of things. But extractor bounce, where it actually comes away from the rim as part of the recoil cycle, that's a real thing.
Never knew.
A whole new thing now, especially with suppressor. I mean, it's not a whole new thing. I mean, it's just a whole new thing we're seeing all over again because of suppressors and overgassing.
Well, we weren't going to work in a gunsmithing tonight, but we worked into it.
I couldn't help you with that. I used to hammer Chuck E. stuff.
Here's a question though that I wanted to bring up to you too. The reality of is there a way, or let me rephrase that, have we on the range, have we made a gunfight real as real as it can be, or have we shortchanged people because it's just cardboard or steel that they're shooting at, and they're not, and it's not engaging, that this thing can be moving from side to side, up, down, all around. The only thing that can mitigate that is force on force. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't 100%. I'm a big believer that if the student's mind is engaged in what we're doing and understands the context of what we're doing, but then do you have to shoot some moving stuff? Do you have to do some force on force stuff? Yeah, absolutely you do. But no, the thing is what's the student thinking about? What's the instructor thinking about as they're presenting training? And we can do a lot of things in our mind, but sometimes you can't get everybody on the same page. But paper and steel are definitely, they limit. They're a limitation, but they're what we can do safely.
Yeah.
How many people? I offer force on force courses. How many people want to come pay for 75 cents a round? Not very many, because that's an expensive course. Plus guns and the bolts. UTMs now, like I said, they run about 75 cents a round. That's a limitation, for a lot of people.
Looks like we lost Chuck.
Good. I'm glad somebody else having some IT problems today.
Maybe I assume he'll be back here shortly.
He's intimidated.
Hey, Lyle.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, I've got something real quick I'd like to ask that I think would be pretty pertinent. And then, we can ask this to Buck, and then hopefully we get Chuck back on board and we can ask him the same question. Buck, one of the big crazes nowadays is IDPA, USPSA, and all these competitive shooting sports, 3 guns, stuff like that. How does that benefit one when it comes to possibly engaging in a defensive shooting later on? Let's say that you're a heavy competitor, masterclass IDPA shooter or masterclass USPSA shooter. Is that type of skill beneficial in a defensive shooting, or is it going to create bad habits?
The skill set, the shooting skill set, whether it's bullseye shooting in competition, whether it's, like you said, the action sports in competition, the shooting skill set will always benefit you no matter where you apply the shooting skill set from. But they're not to be confused with fighting in any way, shape, or form. Doesn't mean that it's going to get you killed in the streets, because it's probably not going to. But there are some inherent things to competing that, as long as a person knows that's an inherent limitation to fighting, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And then the stress inoculation of the competition is going to be very advantageous in gun handling under stress. There's no doubt. So yes, it totally crosses over. and no, in some ways it doesn't cross over. The primary one to me is one of the things that I have a hard time working around, because it's important to teach people to manage recoil. It's important to teach people to have aggressive fighting stances, and it's important to teach people proper directions of movement in fighting situations. A little further down the line, proper uses of cover, are also involved in there. All of these things are really important to teach. And we use drills, and we use speed drills to do it. But, we also preach, hey, you're responsible for every round you fire.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how many instructors, have you ever had an instructor says, you're not really responsible for every round you fire? No, we're responsible for all the rounds we fire. So where I run into this big, like this big thing in my training is we're teaching all this fighting stance, this recoil management. We're doing it through speed. We're doing it through manipulations on the firearm. And yet I'm doing it the whole time knowing that most human beings can't process information much faster than a half second. But I can teach you to pull your trigger in 0.18 or 0.20, or if you're Jerry Mikulik, God knows, what that split time is. So, am I teaching people to fire guns faster than they can process, or faster than they can shut off the signal to stop pulling the trigger? And I don't know. I just try to make people aware of what the limitations are on the human body, why we're doing specific training and why we're not. And, as long as people have a really good idea of that stuff, it's all good. But I will tell you, the POIs coming out of the last, 18, 19 years of war, don't reflect anything that happens in competition.
Hey, Buck, real quick, explain POI for those that don't know.
Yeah. Just points of instruction.
Yeah.
Points of instruction. Sometimes we refer to them as principles of instruction, or principles of the instruction. But yeah, points of instruction of our course load.
Quick question: do you guys think that Chuck and Buck, both of you, do you think that the hit to the hit ratio that we're seeing, like a kind of like out of New York, 20% hit ratio, do you think that comes from the fact that bam, 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 bam? Their body's working faster than their brain's going?
Well, I'll answer first, because I don't have the best answer to this, and Chuck does. My assumption, my impression when I get around very large police departments is that the difficulty in training the number of officers that they have and retraining those officers yearly, just to get them through qualifications and stuff. I'm going to tell you, there's monstrous challenges in providing appropriate instruction on using guns and use of force and things like that. It's just it's a monumental task to put that many people through. I think you're back to what Chuck was talking about. Maybe they're not as good as shots, and they're not as good of weapons handlers. And so the thought processes are more on, what am I doing to try not to die, rather than what am I doing effectively in this situation. And I'm not even sure that's in a way it is an indictment on the individual. In other words, we should all seek our own, but I'm just telling you that to train the number of people that they have, it isn't. I don't even know how they do that. I don't know how their training departments even get done the minimum standards that they need to get done. Tell you the truth.
How many officers are they looking at in the city of New York? I mean, what are we talking, like 6,000 or 8,000? Or no, it's over that.
Oh,
no, they're looking at like 46,000.
40, that's what I was saying.
Bigger population in New York City, just in the police department, than a lot of towns in Kansas.
Yeah.
So Chuck, can you answer that?
One thing I will throw out, because people, I hear this a lot, FBI statistics. We don't have FBI statistics on hit ratios and police officer involved gunfights. Most people extrapolate that from the old SOP 9 report that came out of NYPD. And that's where people get that 15, 18, 20% hit rate. And NYPD is its own animal. I can tell you that, my contacts in Oklahoma City, their qualification goes out to the 50-yard line. For the longest time, I don't know if it's still true, they had a 70, 75% hit rate. LAPD, when they were allowed to do gunfighter training, they had hit rate up there. LAPD SWAT up near 100%. LAPD SIS up near 100%. And you compare that to Tom Gibbons student shootings. Tom Gibbons students in concealed carry shootings have had a near 100% hit rate. So part of it is mindset, part of it is practice, part of it is directed practice. But an advantage that civilians have that cops don't have is, in the police world, the police often start the encounter, the criminal starts the fight. In the civilian self-defense world, the criminal starts the encounter, the civilian starts the fight. So it's a reversed initiative deficit. If a guy comes up to you and he's got a gun in his waistband and says, "Give me all your money," you get to make the first move, pulling your gun instead of your wallet. Now, a lot of times cops have to car stop people in dark alleys, things like that. And then they put a flashlight on them. Hey, police officer, don't move. Show me your hands. Now what? Well, the bad guy gets the option of the first move. If you look at the NIJ study called Violent Encounters, a lot of those officers started their gunfight by getting shot. Now, let's say, Lyle, you're a master class IDPA shooter, but we got a new course of fire. Your signal, your start signal isn't a beep anymore. Your start signal for your course of fire is, I'm going to shoot you in the leg with a 22. So your course of fire starts when I put a 22 hollow point through the calf of your leg, and then you have to go shoot your course of fire. Do you think that is going to have some bearing on how well you shoot that course of fire past that point?
Heck yeah, it is.
So all of these dynamics are in play. I can tell you a lot of big city police departments have horrible training. They have watered down their qualification courses are not even what I would call a sobriety test. A lot of qualification courses are only a sobriety test. But like I know Boston PD only shoots out to 15 yards. The state of Ohio only shoots out to 50 feet. So they keep watering down the standards. Something I throw out there for the gun community and for the public is, police standards deteriorate because the voting public allows it to happen. When's the last time you asked one of your elected officials to make police training something that is an emphasis? When's the last time you've heard anybody say, I called up my city councilman, I called up my county commissioner, I called up my state senator and said, you know what, I want my cops to be better trained. I'm tired of this. I don't know anybody that's ever done that. So quite frankly, we get the cops that we vote for. If we have inadequate firearms training, if you got a place with a culture like New York City, very, very anti-gun, it is what it is. They also, NYPD also is forced by policy to carry Glocks or other pistols, and they have more than a 12-pound trigger on their guns.
Right.
So, Buck and I have talked about triggers on Glocks, triggers on different pistols. You really start to disadvantage yourself. You got a 12-pound trigger, 15-pound trigger on a gun. Now you got inadequate training. You got 46,000, 48,000 cops that need to go through the range. So maybe they only shoot once or twice a year. It's a recipe for that sort of thing, in my opinion.
That kind of segues into a question that I have. I don't know if Clint, did that answer your question, by the way, for everything?
Sort of. Chuck, you missed my question because you were, I think you
he was
dropped off or something
offline.
like that.
Yeah, my internet got knocked off for a minute.
So my question is one of the big things out there right now is IDPA, USPSA, 3-gun, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to get your opinion on how beneficial is that to a person as far as using that or preparing them for a confrontation on the street, or is it a disadvantage?
I think it's an extremely valuable tool. And if you don't believe me, I'll point out names you can Google up. Jim Cirillo, who was a legendary gunfighter that came out of New York City in the Stakeout Squad days. He was a heavy competition shooter, and he advocated the PPC, the old revolver course. They'd shoot out to the 50-yard line, and he was an advocate of being a handgun hunter. More current guys, unfortunately, Jim's no longer with us, but I was blessed to train with him. Nowadays, Pat McNamara, he's a retired Delta Force guy who was in charge of their firearms training. He was a big USPSA competitor, and he's still a big competition advocate. A current guy, I just had a brain fart. The Way of the Gun guy. I'm gonna think of his name here.
Way of the Gun is oh my goodness, Frank Proctor.
Frank Proctor. He's a USPSA Grand Master and an active duty Special Forces guy. You look at a lot of these guys that are really good at what they do, really good at that. And even go back into the olden days. You look at Alvin York, Sergeant York, who was famous for his accomplishments in World War I. He did turkey shoot competitions. He was shooting for meat for his family. And then he applied those skills on the battlefield. I think it can be a very valuable tool. And one of the things Buck pointed out was that I believe is very valid is the stress inoculation. There's a lot of people, shooter understand the course of fire, you nod your head, and that beeper goes off next to your head, and now you don't understand the course of fire anymore. You do dumb stuff. It discombobulates you. I think that minimalistic stress inoculation. Also, when you go to a competition, you're shooting somebody else's problem. Earlier, we were talking about targeted practice instead of plinking. Well, now I'm forced to shoot somebody else's problem, somebody else's course of fire. So that will test me. It's like a pop quiz. Oh man, I need to work on my reload, or I need to work on my 25-yard shooting because I just did poorly in that course of fire on that. So I think it's a very valuable adjunct to our program, and I'm a big advocate for it.
One of the guys that I think is probably recognized, Ken Hackathorn. Everybody would recognize Ken Hackathorn's name. That's been around the gun community for a little while now. And did he start USPCA?
He was one of the initial people with USPSA. You think about it, Jeff Cooper. Jeff Cooper helped start USPSA. And then later, Ken Hackathorn, Larry Vickers, Tom Gibbons, all of them with a heavy real world, experience. They helped start IDPA. They were heavily involved in that. I mean, heck, Larry Vickers' name is tied to the Vickers count part of the competition. And you got Delta Force guys, Special Forces guys, career cops. Who are involved in starting these competitions. I think that should tell people something.
Unfortunately, I've got Buck is muted. Buck, can you? I think
his IT department needs fired again.
So Chuck, you would basically say that the old adage that IDPA, USPSA, and stuff like that will create bad scars, I guess, or bad muscle memory scars is pretty much false.
I think it's false. I really do. I use USPSA and IDPA both as a training adjunct to the training that I do. It's not 100% of what I do, but I think it's a valuable adjunct. And I've seen people that, if you look at less tactical shooting, like what Jim Cirillo was involved with the old PPC courses, it was police pistol combat, I think, is what police practical. Anyway, that was a glorified bullseye shoot with revolvers, and but Jim integrated those skills into his skill set so hard that his very first pistol fight, it was a 1 against 3 with a hostage rescue component thrown in. And what did he do? 100% hits, including one guy that he had to make a headshot past the hostage to take the guy out. You don't get those kind of skills just going out plinking.
But can you talk for us just to see if we got your audio back, man?
Should have it. I don't have a little mark thing anymore.
Okay, there we go. One question that I know we're running late, a little late on time here too. One question I did want to bring up real quick, actually 2 of them, but y'all kind of addressed timers and their value on the range versus reality, and you talked about stress inoculation. What are some of the other maybe advantages or disadvantages to the timer? Either one of you.
I think it helps you. Like, we shoot at targets and we score targets. And why do we do that? So we can tell how accurate we are. Well, I think if you are keeping the same accuracy and you're doing drills on a timer, and now you're doing the same accuracy faster, that would give you an indication that you're doing better. My friend Todd Green, that we talked about earlier, who's no longer with us, he wrote an article on his blog that's still out there about feelings. He'll tell you feelings lie. The target doesn't lie and the timer doesn't lie. So if you want to actually know, if we're going to have some sort of competition, if it's going to be a marathon, there's a timer in a marathon. How do we know who won the marathon? It's on a timer. Or a sprint. I think it's a valuable training adjunct to tell you, maybe, hey, I was really accurate, but man, I was slow as heck. So, where do I need to put my emphasis at for a bit?
Buck, where do you land on that with timers, man?
I'm in that ballpark. I mean, it's a measurement tool. But I would say far more important is with regards to timers, is it's not always important to beat the timer. I mean, as a measurement tool, it is, but just managing time in pretty much any situation, time is the one thing that we kind of control. How long we spend doing something is something we control. And having a working knowledge of time in order to spend an appropriate amount on a given task is very important. Like, I will give people, we shoot a half and half drill. It's an old drill. It's Kyle Lamb's drill. But it's 10 shots in 10 seconds at 20 yards. Most people, when they first step up, they're burning that thing down in 4 or 5 seconds. And that's not the point of the drill, as to how fast you can do it. The point of the drill is just how much time you have to do it. And, I would say that is as important as, and I'm 100% with Chuck on this. Hey, it's a measurement tool. It's a way to know you're getting the same accuracy at a faster rate. Good for you. You're doing things right. But sometimes it's also a tool just to get some management skills around how long do I have to do something. Not that makes a difference in what I can do on the range, but in that the buzzer goes off, I'm not in a race to just destroy everything I've done all morning long, and because the buzzer went off, and I'm just gonna really mess up the whole drill. I like it both ways. I don't run a timer on a lot of things. I run timers on what we consider standards and why, so we can measure those standards and see how somebody progresses. You know, so yeah, there's a lot of good uses to it. I don't use timers in CQB classes. Like, that's just not a thing to me. It's not, and I've seen people do it, but it's not a thing to me. You know, that's not, you know, what do we have? Is speed something we're managing there? Yes, but we're managing appropriate speed. You know what I mean? And that's so I see both sides. I like timers for both things, and I like people to become, if you want to call it, I don't even know if it's being spatially aware, but if I'm giving you 10 seconds to do something, it's a really good idea to use 8.5, 9, 9.5, 9.9 seconds of that to do it. You know, it's not a negative thing. You know? So
Chuck, I saw Chuck nodding his, or kind of nodding his head there. What are you thinking there, brother?
Well, and then part of what Buck reminded me, that people will often get in the cadence of firing and they'll shoot at the same speed regardless. So up close, you were talking about close quarter versus long distance earlier. They'll shoot the same speed at 3 yards that they do at 25, or vice versa. And I think Buck can back me up on this. You have guys like the Kansas Sea Post, where you run cops through the qual, 3-yard line, they'll pull their gun, bam, bam, bam. 25-yard line, they got 5 rounds, they get 12 seconds. Well, they'll pull their gun, bam, bam, bam. Dude, that's 2 completely different shooting problems. Now, if I pull my gun at 3 yards and I'm going bang, 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 that's something the timer's going to tell me. If I have 12 seconds at the 25-yard line and I fire all 5 rounds in 5 seconds and I'm not getting, you know, let's say I'm not even hitting paper, then, you know, the timer is a diagnostic tool. And I'm making ridiculous examples to make the point. The timer can be a diagnostic tool that you need to slow down or speed up your cadence for the problem at hand, that you can't use one speed for everything.
We have a question from over here in the chat. I'm watching the chat at Crusader Arms channel. Buck says hi. You know who that is, probably, from Crusader Arms channel. Sure. But he has a question over here, a couple of them. He says, we often see guys show up on the range with full-size gun in an OWB gear, outside the waistband gear, to run a class, but then they carry something like a 43 or a subcompact gun in real life.
That's you know, I don't limit what people do in classes, but you know, I took a 2-day covert carry class with Mike Pannone that was over 800 rounds with a Glock 43 from appendix carry, and I can tell you at the end of 2 days, like, it sucked. And I didn't win any prizes. You know, he gives away prizes, and I didn't win any prizes.
Doggone it.
But, you know, I got a lot of repetitions, and I found out, you know, a major issue with an incog holster, when you're rushing really fast on drawing a 43 from your waistband. So, you know, I identified some problems doing that. I cut myself up pretty good, and you know, a pretty good beating over 2 days. But I did it because that's the gun I carry 90. Well, that's a gun I carry almost 100% of the time, and then about 90% of the time, it's the only gun I carry. So, you know, but you know what? That's not. I'm not telling people that, hey, come to my class and beat yourself up for 2 days either. You know, so I don't know. But he's totally right. I mean, you carry inside the waistband with a Glock 43, but you show up with a tricked out 17 and a, you know, outside the waistband holster, or, you know, or something. You know, is there training value to it? Yeah. You know, you're drawing, you're lining up the sights, and you're pressing the trigger, and somebody's screaming at you while you do it. So I don't know, but if you're going to carry a little gun, man, shoot that little gun, son, because it's a lot harder.
Chuck, what do you think, man?
That's been with us for a very long time. The guys like the Ken Hackathorn guys back in the day talked about how, USPSA guys were shooting competition 1911s, and then if they carried a gun at all, it would be like a J-frame 38 stuck in their pocket. Nowadays, we see a lot of that. People shooting 17s, 34s in IDPA, things like that. And they're carrying like a Ruger LCP in their pocket. It's going to, I believe that is enough of an issue that I actually came up with a small guns class, because what I have found is that some of the malfunction drills, reloads, things like that for the small guns don't follow the same techniques, TTPs, tactics, and procedures that the big guns do, right? So not an 800 round class through the course of 2 days with hard standards, but I do a 200 round class on just small gun skills. That if people want to get a workout with those guns, I'm a big advocate of actually knowing what you can do with the gear you got on hand.
So the key question is, do you give out prizes at your class so Buck can come take it and he can win a prize?
I never win a prize. Chuck wins all the prizes.
Oh crap!
Now I'm gonna have to probably start giving out prizes now.
the other question that Crusader has here, he says, do either of you? He's asking this to both of you. Do either of you see that as an issue? Oh, okay, it's connected with that. Okay, see that as an issue. Basically, is it worth investing all the rounds or reps at a class? Okay, so you answered his question. Very good. Another question that I want to ask you guys is this: when you see guys out on the range and they're doing the shoot and assess, and this number of, what are your thoughts on the head wagging, if you will?
That's I mean, assessing your surroundings is vitally important in real life. Had you been assessing your surroundings enough before it happened, perhaps you wouldn't have been. But as instructors, we got lazy and we started letting people just kind of take a peek left and a peek right, and they're really not doing anything with their assessments in terms of what we're doing. And this is more from a law enforcement background than anything else. But yeah, we got like, hey, look, he's turning his head. That's what he wanted to do. Did he fricking look at anything? You know what I mean? I don't know. But I think that's something that us as instructors let happen too much. But absolutely. Now, what's the most important assessment that you do? The dude that tried to kill you. But is it important to assess your surroundings other than that? It is important, but should, do we let people get away with some BS assessments on the range? Absolutely we do. Because one, as instructors, we're lazy, and two, we have time requirements, so I try to do a better job on that now. I try to tell people, if you look around, frickin' look around, and then before you holster up because you looked around, go back to the one that tried to kill you. Like that's the last look we need to give for sure.
Do you ask folks then to do a full 360, or is it just a simple look to your right, look to your left, assess, and then back to primary?
Okay, so again, perception and background is everything on this. And if we're on a flat range, absolutely. I tell people some type of a 360. If we're in CQB and you got a dude pulling rear perimeter, I don't want you freaking looking back. And then we get to the whole deal. And this has to do assessments. I want you, this has to do it's a broad range of assessments. Okay. Has to do with CQB. I'm running a bunch of cops through CQB. I want them to clear their primary sector. I want them to re-clear their primary sector, and then I want them to take a look at their secondary sector. Because I'll be honest with you, we don't get enough repetitions to know what we saw the first time we looked at it. I work with some other guys in some other applications. they never recheck their primary sector. Like, they clear their primary sector, they clear their secondary sector, and they move on with the next priority of work because they freaking saw everything in it. You know, different levels, different assessments, different needs, you know. But again, as instructors, we have to be very cognizant of who we're working with, and is what we're saying matching the environments they're in or why they came to our course. And then are we holding them to it, or are we letting them be sloppy, you know? And yeah, you know, I can tell you from past experience, I let some of our cops get sloppy because they look left, they look right. Did they look at anything? No, but in real life they will. Well, I don't think in real life they probably will. And I let them get away with something, you know? So yeah, I try to really apply that. I believe in it, but I try to apply it appropriately to the environment and the people.
Gotcha. Chuck, where do you land on that, bro?
So I've actually codified my own personal post-shooting procedure that I teach. It's turned into a shooting. It's gone to guns. So what my checklist is, you're firing shots, say the target collapses. You need to start asking yourself, did I hit him? Did it work? Do I need to shoot that guy again? At that point, that's when you start asking yourself, you know, did I hit him? Did it work? Do I need to shoot him again? If no, I don't need to shoot him again. From there, did he bring friends to this fight? Is there anybody else that I need to shoot? And that's when you start, because you shoot somebody, you're going to follow them to the ground. When people lose blood pressure, a lot of times that's when they collapse. When you lay people, like in a fainting situation, when you lay people down, they'll regain blood pressure and wake back up. Last thing you want to do is get yourself in a situation where you shot a guy, he fell over, you thought the fight was over, and he's coming back at you again. That happens. That really does happen. The active self-protection guy, John Correa, has got a couple of videos that show things like that. It was a recent one, I believe it was down in Honduras. Fortunately, the good guy won that part of the fight because the bad guy got lax. But anyway, post-shooting, did I hit him? Did it work? Do I need to shoot him again? Past that point, did he bring friends to this fight? Is there anybody else I need to shoot? And at that point, you start evaluating, what's the condition of my gun? If I had a stoppage, do I need to reload? Do I need cover? What is the condition of my partner or my family? If I got family with me, a police partner, whatever the case may be, then you start thinking about communications. I'm going to get on the radio. I'm going to get on 911, that kind of thing. When you're talking about doing the 360 looking around, that is a range artificiality. In real life, you're going to move. You can't really do that on the line of shooters, but in real life, you're probably going to move to cover, find a position of visual dominance where you can dominate that situation. Or maybe, you know, if you're in a dangerous scenario, you know, maybe it was a gang violence thing. You may have to get out of there while you're on 911. Hey, I shot a guy. He's laying on the corner of 12th and Main, and I have to leave. This is what's going on. It could be something like that. But I got feedback from guys in real life. It used to be guys would shoot like the qualification course. I give them a threat command, say 3 yards, 3 seconds. We got 3 rounds to fire. Bam, bam, bam. They want a speed holster. I would make them go through a checklist. Did I hit him? Did it work? Do I need to shoot him again? Or did he bring friends to this fight? What's the condition of my pistol? During the Kansas qual, you're supposed to manage your ammo on your own without being prompted. You're not told when to reload. So if you run out of ammo, you're out of ammo on the next course of fire, and you lose those rounds. So it behooves you for a good qual score to maintain ammo awareness. I had more than one of my officers was involved in a live shooting who told me afterwards they thought that, you know, why don't we just shoot the qual and go to lunch? Why are we doing all this other stuff? It's dumb. And then afterwards in their real life shooting, they're like, man, I could hear you in the back of my head. You know, did I shoot him? Did it work? Do I need to shoot him again? they start threat scanning, and it expands their vision, dominance of the scene. The feedback I've gotten in real life is that's a solid procedure. And if you read like Paul Howe, some of the other guys out there, where they talk about expanding your vision, evaluating post-shooting or pre-shooting criteria, I think I'm in good company with my assessment.
I'm going to ask a question here in a second about some materials, but first, I want my last question that I have written down here for y'all is about triggers, and this came up on our poll on Kansas Gun Community over on the Facebook group, and I asked the question specifically: do you need a good trigger? I think that's the way I asked it. Do you need a good trigger,
real good trigger,
in a dynamic critical incident or in a shooting situation, a combat situation? And it engendered a lot of interesting discussion. We'll put it that way.
You just can't you can't drop it, can you, Lyle? You have to stir the pot.
Hey. So I'm going to ask you guys: do you need a good trigger when you get into a critical incident?
I shouldn't even answer this. I just evidently I'm, like the albatross. I don't know. Let me put it to you this way. I've done some good work with a double action HK trigger that I didn't enjoy. I've shot some pretty decent stuff with a frickin' double action Kel-Tec that I didn't enjoy. I've done some work with a UMP trigger. Like you want to complain about triggers, okay? The UMP series is not known for its sweet trigger.
Yeah.
And I haven't enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy, working that trigger system. I'm just telling you, the more stress that was on me, the less attention I paid to what the trigger felt like. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
You know what? But you know what? Since I retired, I'll say this. Since I retired, I got a Geisley, a single stage duty trigger in my AR. I've got some kind of an aftermarket trigger in my Glock. But I wouldn't have them in there if I was working with those guns. They'd be stock triggers. I just haven't shot that many bad. Well, I have. I've shot some bad stock triggers, but not to affect my ability to shoot. Now, is it way more fun with my Geisley and my AR? Way more fun. It's a flat face trigger and it's fun. Is my flat face trigger and my Glock more fun? Yeah, but my 48, my 43s, duty triggers, just standard stuff. All fine, good to go.
So we all know that engendered some very interesting controversy over on the group. But I just, so now that you retired, you become a trigger snob then, right?
Well, and here's what I think. Here's where I think we got sideways on triggers. And I guess if we're wrong, then I'm really quitting social media. But I think where we got sideways on triggers was, I think some people were talking about shooting. And I wasn't talking about shooting. I'm talking about firing a gun in anger under frickin' stress.
Yes. Yeah.
That's all I'm talking about. It's just, I just don't. I think it's the least important component of the firing chain. As you become less capable, as your grip is lessened, as your stance is lessened, the trigger becomes more of a component. But if you're crushing a grip on that gun and you got a good forward stance and a lot of weight into it, and you're paying attention to tactics, that trigger's just not that important.
Chuck, where do you come down on the trigger stuff, man?
Well, I could be flippant and throw a quote at you from one of my mentors who's an extraordinary shot. And he says a really nice trigger is a crutch for MRFers who can't shoot. I'm in the middle. I've seen people do, like I know of a case of a negligent discharge police shooting that was a fatality on somebody that should have been shot because the gun had a Haley skimmer trigger in it. So you got a duty gun with a sub 3 pound trigger pull.
Oh my goodness.
That's absolutely ridiculous. I think people try to compensate for their lack of skill by buying hardware. A box stock Glock trigger, probably 5.5 pounds, 6.5 pounds. Anybody on the planet can manage that really well. Now, if you go the other way, can you do dumb things like put a New York 2 trigger in your gun and now you got a 14-pound trigger pull? That's getting a little silly too. But I'll tell you, some of the really competent people, if you look at Ken Hackathorn talks about street triggers on 1911s, he wants them above 4.5 pounds because we know vasoconstriction and stress reaction, we're going to lose feel in our hands. And it is, if you negligently shoot somebody that you shouldn't have shot, you wouldn't be the first person that did that. One of my good friends, Claude Werner, he doesn't even like striker fired guns for threat management at this point. This is a guy who was a career special forces guy. He was the chief instructor of the world famous Rogers shooting school. So he knows how to shoot. He knows threat management. He likes to have a double action, single action gun or a double action revolver for threat management. People forget that a lot of what we do, particularly in police work, is not shooting. It's not a shooting problem. I need to shoot a bullseye at 50 yards. We're threat managing, so we need equipment that's compatible with all of that. I can tell you, if I got a sniper rifle and I want to be able to make hostage rescue shots, I'm going to want a good 3 pound trigger on that bolt gun. That's not what I don't want anything like that in my pistol. I want a little bit of take up, because then the gun's telling me, hey, dummy, you got your finger on the trigger before it goes bang. And I want, I want a little bit of poundage on there, at least 4.5, 5.5 pounds, particularly on the striker fired guns, Glocks. Most of my guns I've got set up for about a 7.5 pound trigger.
Clint, do you want to weigh in because you play with these things?
Good. See that big old bus that he just threw me under?
Yeah. I love you, brother. I really do. Now, what do you I mean, you're playing, he's playing with LEO guns down there. Clint, I mean, what are you seeing that they're doing or liking in?
Pretty much for the most part, most of the Leo guys, government guys down here, I mean, they want the trigger just pretty much smoothed up a little bit and maybe a little bit shorter, and that's about it. Weight kind of remains the same. They want a crisp wall that they hit, so when they prep to a solid wall, and then other than that, they want a little bit of weight behind it so that they have room for error. And that's pretty much what I'm seeing down here. The triggers that I build out of my shop are, some of the guys carry them, but for the most part, it's USPSA, IDPA guys, stuff like that that are getting a really super, getting a super light, 2 pound Glock trigger pull, stuff like that. Even my 48 has, I think I weighed it the other day. My 48 that I carry every day has got a 5.8 pound trigger, something like that. And it's nice. I mean, it's short, sweet, crisp. So
I weigh in, I keep a stock trigger in mine, all mine, just for the simple reason, just what Chuck pointed out. And I guess it's just been my decision that I made. Nobody really taught me that, but if I wanted to get out of the trigger, I can. I carry a stock in both a Smith & Wesson and in a Glock, and especially a Glock, they're a little different trigger, of course, but you can get out of it. I carry Gen 4s. You can get out of it, and that just brings a little more comfort to me, that if I'm on the trigger and I have to get out of it because I don't need to shoot the dude, then I can, rather than sitting on like a 2.5 pound, 3 pound, 1911 trigger that's going to, you know, upon any kind of constriction of the hands is going to go off. Yeah, that's no bueno for me. The question that I wanted to ask you all before, I know we need to wrap up here. Chuck and Buck, what are some resources, let's say some books or some videos that you would highly recommend? Let's say two, that you would say these two resources, if you're going to be a defensive shooter and look at reality and not just live on the range, here's two resources you need to read or watch. And whoever wants to go first.
That's really hard for me. You know, one of the first ones, I like if I go, you know, because a lot of times you go back to really early stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and is it as applicable today? Maybe, maybe not. But in the gravest extreme, probably started tweaking some of the stuff that I did. You know, it made a difference in my thinking for sure. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to just lean on because there's some law enforcement stuff in there for sure. The old caliber press stuff, you know, but I don't want to go there. I would say for people who are not, who don't deal with angry people, violent people a lot, The Gift of Fear is a really good book. I recommend it to a lot of people. I don't know it's not going to be fun because it's not triggers and it's not sights and, you know, gun coatings. Those are resources that in the past have changed the way I think on killing.
Yeah,
it is a great book, but my God, it is really in depth. Like, you know, I'd love to tell you I'm so intellectual that Sun Tzu and stuff like that, but I'm just not that intellectual, you know. So no. I like stuff. I really think that, like, for like me, if somebody would come out with a really good use of force gun book that I could color, I'd buy that sucker all day long, man. You know, all day long. There you go, Chuck. There's your next million. Coloring books for defensive shooters, baby.
There might be a market for that.
Chuck, what's your choices, man?
People that I know that wrote books that are worth buying. My friend Annette Evans, she was a pro shooter for SIG, very accomplished female shooter. She wrote a book on how to dry practice. So Annette Evans, her book's really solid on getting into this and how to set up a dry practice, not just dry fire, but a dry practice regimen. And then one of my mentors, Tom Gibbons, he's written several iterations of a book on living defensively. Tom's book is absolutely superb. If you like revolvers at all, Ed Lovett wrote a book on snubbies, but it's not just about snub-nose revolvers because he was a career CIA guy, and the snub-nose revolver was the last-ditch scenario. So what most of the book was about was actually defensive living, situational awareness, how to create better situational awareness, things like that. So even though it's a snub-nose revolver book, it's really good reading. I'll echo Buck's thoughts on Gift of Fear is absolutely superb. I wish Gavin DeBecker wasn't an anti-gun guy. So for gun people, if you want to ignore the whole anti-gun stuff at the end of the book, because he's kind of gun control, but the Gift of Fear is superb, especially for ladies, because part of what gets women victimized is they nice themselves into being victims. And that is something that happens exponentially more to females than it does to men, even though that's going to come across as sexist. But women get victimized differently than men do, very typically. So Gift of Fear is a good one. Almost anything Mas Ayub has written has been good to go. That's good stuff. Can't see. Let me see. I got a big screen on that one. Yeah.
Well, here, let me get it on there. Deadly Force by Mas Ayub. Y'all can see that. Deadly Force by Mas Ayub. Understanding your right to self-defense. This is like
Moss has put some good stuff out over the years.
Yeah.
Dave Spalding's another guy. Very good stuff to be reading. If you like to get on YouTube, video content, almost anything Craig Douglas puts out is worth watching. It may not apply to everybody's scenario because some of it may be a little bit more applicable to I'm an undercover officer or something like that. But the vast 99.95% of what he's teaching, it applies to everybody in the defensive community, concealed carry people, things like that. His study of close quarter combatives and the close quarter use of the gun is second to none. There's nobody on the planet that can touch what he's putting out there as far as content right now. And that's easy. You can YouTube Craig Douglas, ShivWorks videos, and it's short things that you can go through real easily. I know that's way more than two. You said two, but
so we're running up on it, and I know Chuck's
been
up for go ahead, Clint, real quick.
Just a real quick question. What do y'all think about Jeff Cooper's old book, The Principles of Personal Defense?
Yeah.
I think it's good reading, and it's good to know where we came from and how we got to be where we're at. It's solid information. A lot of these guys, Jeff Cooper, Bill Jordan, Jim Cirillo, I'm a big fan of. All their books are still available. You can read this stuff. You can get their books nowadays, and it's definitely worth reading.
Totally agree. Any Elmer Keith books, any of those guys, man. I mean, go back in the all good stuff. Yeah. And I can't, I can't, disagree with Chuck at all. I totally agree with ShivWorks guy. But the only caveat I'd say to that is you better have some background, because that stuff is like that. It's physical, and it requires real gun skills, but it's hands down best stuff out there. I recommend him all over the place.
Well, guys, I know it's getting late, and Chuck has been up for probably 24 hours or so, or over 24 hours. I don't know.
Getting there.
So I know you need to hit the sack, man. And Buck's probably had a long day too, out with cattle or something.
All the IT work, yeah.
Oh, it's the IT department, baby.
Yeah. I need to open my shingle. Keep your eye out. Midwest IT. I don't know what IT stands for, but I'm gonna start doing this stuff with electronics, man. So give me a holler. I'll come do your stuff for you.
Oh my gosh, you're killing me, man. But I do want to give you all a plug. I know there's stuff coming up in 2020 that Chuck and I've got going on, and then over at Tallgrass. But you still got stuff, Chuck, in 2019, and I know you probably do too, Buck. And so I want you guys to give you a plug and tell us the classes coming up and how to get a hold of you and how to follow you, all those type of things. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Buck.
Right now I don't have much on the schedule. I'm kind of traveling, working with another guy, doing some stuff with him. So
another guy, come on.
There. This September we've got Panone coming in for a handgun, pistol caliber, carbine, rifle course for 3 days. That's coming up. I'm gonna put some stuff on the schedule this summer. I just haven't got around to getting anything else on. I got some military stuff coming in, and a couple of those classes. And like I said, I'm doing some traveling. So, but yeah, we're gonna do something. Give us a holler, man. We'll put something together for some guys or whatever. But my lane's kind of narrow right now. I've narrowed up a lot from a lot of the other stuff.
You're actually you're shortchanging yourself, Buck. You're actually doing some work. Can you say who you're doing work with?
Well, I'm doing a little bit of work with Lead Faucet Tactical right now. So
with Dan Brokos,
yeah, with Dan. He's a good dude. He's throwing some stuff my way here and there now and then. So, yep, I appreciate it. Dan's taking care of me.
So how do folks find you though, Buck? I mean, where are they going to find you at on this IT business, brother?
Yeah, that's right. Well, on my gun website, defensemidwest.com, soon my IT business will be opening up on there, and I might even post a few new classes on there now and then. Facebook, but that Facebook's more, I don't know what I had for supper than what I did on the range, I'm afraid. So yeah, I got Defense Midwest on Facebook too, or Buck Peddicord. I don't know. There's some Instagram stuff under my name, but yeah, none of it's too serious. And like I said, nothing. I just don't have very detailed stuff out there right now because I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow. Well, tomorrow I'm flying to Ohio to teach at the Ohio Tactical Officers Association, but after that I don't know what I'm doing the next day.
just small stuff. I don't know, just small stuff. I tell you what, Buck, I appreciate you very, very much. And Chuck, where can they find you? What do you got coming up, man?
A lot of my stuff is actually lately been out of town. I'm going to Atlanta, then I'm going to Racine, Wisconsin. I'm helping my mentor, Tom Gibbons, at the end of the month, Kansas City. He's got a range master firearms instructor course going. I'm helping him with that. So I've got several classes coming up, small pistol skills where it's snub nose revolvers, small semi-automatic pistols, my pepper spray and street encounters instructor course where I'm teaching less lethal for non-law enforcement and non-law enforcement context. I've got a lot of that sort of thing going on. I do locally, I do private client work quite a bit. And I know Buck does that as well, where you are working with people in ones and twos, basic skill level. So I've got that going on. My website, Agile Training and Consulting, that's www.agiletactical.com. Got a Facebook page under that name as well. So all my course calendar is up on my website right now.
And I did, your links will be in the description of this video, so folks can click and go from there. So
speaking of that, Tom Gibbons class, if that thing still has an opening and I know that I have the weekend available, I'm gonna try to go pay some money and go take that. I've never had a chance to do that, and it's pretty close. And yeah, so maybe I'll see you there, Chuck.
Well, I know it's sold out, so we'd have to have somebody drop out of class at this point.
Well, send me the names, and I think I can make that
happen. It's that IT specialty.
That's right.
Why do I not doubt that?
Yeah. Well, guys, it's been an awesome pleasure to have you on, and as always, I mean, I'm indebted to you. And we really kind of scraped the surface of things I think that could be talked about between range and reality, but we've done it in an hour and almost 2 hours actually. And I appreciate you guys, man, just giving of your time, and I appreciate Buck's IT department, and I really do. So, but no, you guys, thank you so much, and we'll have you on again if you want to be on at any time. And Clint, of course, thank you, brother, down there in Wichita, for helping out too, and we're popping back and forth here. Let me lock it on in. But just, I want to say thank you from KSConCom, for myself. You guys are friends, and I cherish those friendships, and I appreciate your knowledge. I like to sit and learn, and every time I get to hear you guys talk, get to get on the phone with you, I learn, and I appreciate that. So, and we need to get out on the range together, huh? I need to get out there on the range with you guys, and so that we can go from range to reality. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye for us to KS Guncom. Thank everybody for joining us tonight, and we'll hang on afterwards and chit chat, but if we can for a little while. But for KS Guncom, y'all stay Kansas proud.